Hey guys, JCO here. These are a few of my tombstones. This is a very basic tutorial on how to make these things. Okay, I am not going to be demonstrating any of the things I'm talking about. I am not going to make a tombstone before your very eyes. I'm basically going to tell you how to do this, the techniques I used, the tools I used, and it's up to you to experiment, use your imagination, research it further, what have you. So here we go. Let's start. What are these things made of? Well, there are different materials you could use. I've seen plywood, I've seen cardboard. The ones you buy in the store are typically made of styrofoam, but that's, if you want to go buy them, fine. What's the point? I mean, the whole purpose of this is to make your own, make them very unique. But we use the same material that is what the store-bought ones are made of, and that is styrofoam. Where do you get hunks of styrofoam this size, this shape? Well, what you do is you go to a home improvement store, for instance, Lowe's or Home Depot or what have you, and you get 4 foot by 8 foot, 2-inch thick sheets of styrofoam sheeting, which is used when they build houses as insulation. About 2 inches thick. And it's simply made of styrofoam, very light. Hold on a second. There you can see what color it was in its native state. Usually it's either blue or pink. But then you carve them up and paint them up. And that's what we're going to be covering next. How do you determine what you're going to put on it, how you're going to engrave them, what shape they're going to be, so on and so forth. Let's get into that. Next question is, how do you determine what shape you want your tombstone to be? Well, of course, you can make up your own shapes if you want. If you want some inspiration, go online and Google the phrase tombstone shapes or tombstone templates or tombstone outlines or silhouettes or what have you. You'll come up with a whole lot of hits. Here's an example of what I mean. You can see all different. This is a pretty neat one all by itself because what it shows are two different examples. These two left and right pictures here are each perfect rectangles. In other words, just like a sheet of styrofoam is 4 by 8. So you could get several tombstones out of one sheet of styrofoam using these sizes and templates. The one I'm going to do is this right here to demonstrate this. Now what you do is just draw this onto the piece of styrofoam and then cut it out. Now you could do this freehand if you want to. What I prefer to do, because I already have one of these things, being a Halloween nut, is a projector. All right. If you don't want to go through the expense of getting a projector, like I say, you can do this freehand, but this takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. I just run the feed out of my laptop into the projector and then project the image against the wall. I'm doing it against a piece of plywood here. I don't know if you can see this one. Let me get closer. Okay, and what you would do is project this, against a piece of styrofoam, trace out the image, and then, well, let me do that. Hold on a second. So that's what I've done here. I've just traced out the outline of that tombstone shape onto the plywood here. You would be doing this on styrofoam, like I said. And then, when you turn off the projector, there is the shape of your tombstone that you can cut out. And the neat thing about using a projector is the size of the image changes depending on how close or far away you are to the surface. So if you want this tombstone to be smaller than this, you would simply move the projector closer. And if you want it to be larger, you back the projector up and the image will get bigger as you back away. So you can take whatever shape you want and make it whatever size you want. So that's a cool thing right there. As an example of what I mean, I took this lower left silhouette that you see, this one right here, projected it onto a piece of styrofoam, moved the projector back a little ways to make it the size I wanted it to be, and cut it out, and wound up with that. That's how that works. Next question is, what do you use to actually cut these things, these shapes, out of the sheet of styrofoam? If you're really cheap, you could just use a kitchen knife. You could get an old steak knife and just saw through there inch by inch and get it out of there, but my gosh, what a pain. I personally use a jigsaw, a power electric jigsaw, which I don't have right here. I would show it to you, but they're easy enough to find. You might be able to use a hacksaw. That seems like kind of a blunt instrument to me though for that application. Maybe a coping saw would work. There are tools, there's a thing specifically designed to cut through styrofoam, and it uses a heated wire, which I did use for a couple of very specific applications, but I didn't, generally cut out the entire shape of the thing with that thing, but I'll cover that in just a bit. But just for information purposes, I used a jigsaw. Next thing is epitaphs and names and designs and what do you want to put on there and where do you find it. You might notice, don't know if I mentioned this already or not, every single one of these stones has a different font. Now where did I get those? I went online to a place called fontspace.com and came up with a whole bunch of different kind of fonts. There's let me see how many, all these different fonts here. Like, let me show you this one here. I don't even know how you say that. Anaron, maybe. But there's what I did for Phil McCracken. And I just, again, projected that onto the stone, traced it out, and then did the engraving, which I will get into in just a second. But anyway, it came out like that. The same thing applies to different designs that you might want to carve into your, let me see, into your stone. Where is it here? How about that? Okay. Again, I just downloaded these. I can't remember what phrase I put in for Google to find these things, but just, dig around and use your imagination. These are different things that you could, again, project onto the stone, engrave in there. And let's take a look at this one right here. Second one from the bottom in the middle there. Nice good look at that. Well, I put that on Candy Be Good right there. Projected it, traced it, engraved it. Next question, how do you engrave this stuff? Now this is much more, all of these things, speaking of fonts, see I was stupid right there, that's just good old Times New Roman. Doesn't have to be anything fancy if you don't want it to be. But anyway, engraving this stuff, people use different things. Some people use a soldering iron to melt into the styrofoam. Some people use an X-Acto knife. What I use is a Dremel, a rotary tool with a engraving attachment that comes with it that keeps everything, exactly the right depth, and you can take your time and make everything nice and clean and precise with it. Again, different ways to do it, but that's what I do. Two quick things I want to cover about aging or weathering the tombstone, it's called. A lot of that is done with painting techniques, which I'll get into in a little bit here, but one thing is cracking. Just every stone I have has some degree of cracks running across it, or others. And all I do with that is I use just a pocket knife, a Swiss Army knife, and I just get in there and dig and slash and cut and try to make it as random as I can. And some places it's wider, some places it's narrower, longer, shorter, whatever. And another thing before I get into aging with paint, there's one thing that to me it's imperative to make a stone look authentic and look old, and that is rounding all the sharp edges. And I do this with a handheld orbital sander, and it's just you take off all the sharp edges, which makes it look really, really old. Because if you have these things to where they're, you know, they're perfectly sharp and cut out and everything, it looks so artificial. It looks so brand new, and you're trying to make these things look really old and really weathered. So, you know, make that effort, because it really does make a difference to, you know. And oh, here's one other thing that I only did strictly to weather this one, to make it look like you know, half the stone has, you know, fallen away or worn away or been eroded or whatever you want to say. You could, excuse me, there is a way to weather styrofoam using spray paint. If you just take raw styrofoam and spray it with spray paint, the spray paint will actually eat away some of the stone, or some of the styrofoam rather, and you'll get some you know, some aging that way. You can see some of this in here. That was spray paint. All this stuff in here where it's starting to, you know, pucker and bubble, and, you know, that was spray paint. This big massive stuff here was done with acetone and a small artist paintbrush, just going a little bit by little bit. Styrofoam is really forgiving. It just does, you know, eats into it a little bit at a time. Acetone just goes to town. You got to be really careful when you're using that stuff. You get this again in home improvement stores, and I don't know, you might be able to use a nail polish remover. I think there's acetone in that too. But so anyway, before we get into the painting techniques, that's just it. Spray paint, putting cracks in, maybe extreme weathering like the acetone, like this one I did here, and rounding the corners, taking off all the sharp edges of the thing, will all do wonders as far as making your stones appear old and real. As far as these chunky bases go that I have on 3 of the stones, the kind of pedestal bases, strictly made out of wood, 2 different sizes of wood, 2x6 and 2x4. The inner ones are 2x6, and then these down here are 2x4, and all you do is cut exact size pieces, smaller ones on the ends, and enough to go around the thing entirely. And then just you screw them not only together but into the stone itself. And you do all the 2x6s first, and then you come back and make, you know, you're going to have to make longer pieces because for the 2x4s, because not only do you have to surround the stone, you also have to surround the 2x6s. But it's the same technique. Just cut out hunks of wood and screw everything together, and that's how that's done. The first painting technique we're going to do here could not possibly be easier. It is simply stone spray paint that you get at your home improvement store. It's a can of spray paint that when you spray it on, simulates stone. You can have, like this one here, I believe is simulated granite, and these two are supposed to be sandstone, I believe. But it's pretty effective. I mean, you can, especially from a distance, but I mean, you get in there, I don't know if you can see this on camera or not, but little speckles of white through it, and it adds a certain bit of texture. And here's another one. Spray paint, and that's it. It comes out looking pretty good. The next painting technique is called sponging, and I only did this for a few. I tried to, keep variety with all my stones, but I'm really happy with how this one in particular came out, because that looks pretty authentic to me as far as stone goes. But all it is a technique that you can use painting inside your house too. People use it, sponging techniques on a wall, or rag rolling is another kind of technique that people use. And all this is you put on a dark base coat. In this case, I used dark gray, and then I came back with a lighter shade of gray and I wish I had a sponge right now to show you, but I don't. But it's just a big sea sponge, puckery sea sponge, and you dip it into the paint, and you just go along, patting it on really lightly in like random patterns, and bit by bit, and you make it look like that. And you can use different colors. I use shades of gray in this one. This guy down here used different shades of brown and tan. And then this was, again, different shades of gray. So that is the sponging technique. And the next thing I'm going to go over is a technique called dry brushing. Before I do that, I want to mention a technique that a lot of Halloween people do when they're making their tombstones that I do not do. And that is use stuff that is called monster mud in the industry. And all this is it's a combination of drywall compound and paint. And you mix it together and paint it onto the stone. And when it dries, it simulates actual stone. It gives a very hardened, uneven texture to it, makes it seem like stone. To me, it's an expense and piece of, expensive time and money that I don't think is necessary. I mean, I'm not telling you not to do it. If you want to, fine, because it does work. It does give a nice stone-like texture. But to me, it's not necessary. If you use the proper painting techniques and the proper weathering techniques, I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just tooting my own horn, but I think most of my stuff looks pretty like authentic stone from a distance anyway. I mean, unless you have somebody come up and actually touch the thing, or look at it with a microscope. I'm really happy with how these things look. But the thing with monster mud is it lends itself very readily to this technique called dry brushing. So because of the raised texture that it gives to the stone. So what I do instead is, again, the thing with the spray paint, that the spray paint will eat into styrofoam. And what that does, here again, this is acetone, this extreme stuff going on here. But now look down like in here, okay, and up around in here. And actually I went over the entire thing with a very light dusting of spray paint, but then I came back these certain areas and really hit it for a while to make it be eaten away a little more, because you need that kind of uneven texture to do dry brushing. And all dry brushing is you put on, again, a darker base coat. For instance, this was the shade of base coat I used. And then you come back with your lighter shade, in my case a lighter shade of gray, and you take your paintbrush and load it up with this lighter gray, and then get all the excess paint you can off of it onto a piece of newspaper or spare styrofoam or whatever. Just get your paintbrush loaded up, and then just do this. Paint a piece of newspaper or something, get all of it off of there that you can, and then come back and just very gently drag it like this. And because you're going so lightly, and also because so little paint is on the brush itself, there's not so much paint that it's going to run down into the nooks and crannies. It's just going to adhere to the raised portions, okay? And this is why, monster mud is very effective for this. I'm just saying I don't think it's necessary, because you can still get this very nice mottled, weathered, aged look out of this when you do that. And here's another example of this that, again, I went all over the whole thing with a light coat, and then these little bricks here are actually 1/2 inch styrofoam. you can get these styrofoam sheets in different thicknesses, and I just got a sheet about a 1/2 inch thick and cut out these bricks. Again, hit them pretty hard with spray paint to put the texture on, and then just came in very lightly with the dry brush in 2 different shades. In this case, I'm using brown and mixed in some white later and came up with a much lighter shade of brown. And there's what you get, and so that's dry brushing. The last thing paint-wise is called tea staining. And there are 2 different techniques to do this, and what do I mean by that is this stuff, this discoloration through here, and these streaks, these mildewy looking streaks going through here. And this really does a great job at helping to age the stone, make it look really old. I actually might take all my stones this year and do some more tea staining on them, because it really, really helps. You go online and you look for pictures of real tombstones that are like 100 years, 200 years old. They'll all have some degree of this going on, sometimes really, really heavy. But it's fairly simple to do. There's 2 different ways. I use both on this one. The first one is you put in a cup and you get about 10% black paint and the rest water. And you mix it up real good, and you take an artist paintbrush, a small paintbrush. I'm going to use this just to show that you get a small artist paintbrush, and dip it in, get it wet, and then you just start poking like this. And it'll, you don't want to paint like this. You just want to get it nice and wet and then press. And when you do that, the excess will run down like this. And this is really diluted black paint, so you're not going to get these heavy black streaks. You just get this really discolored, old, mildewy looking stuff. As far as this stuff up here, this was, again, spray paint that is applied, after the stone spray paint. So there's not going to be, the painting is all done and dried before you do this up here. So there's not going to be any more being eaten away when you do this. But you get black spray paint, and then I got my garden hose that has the adjustable nozzle like they all do, and I put it on the mist setting, and I just misted down the top of the stone, got it nice and wet but not soaked, and then took the spray paint and hit it with a light coat of spray paint, and then came back with the mister again. And this would again cause some of this dripping kind of effect, but it will also, I don't know, you just do that 2 or 3 times, mist it, spray paint it, mist it, spray paint it. It's gonna, and you can do more or less water, more or less spray paint, whatever you want to do, but you just do a few layers of that, and that's the kind of effect you get, and I am really, really happy with that. So that's it as far as painting goes. I'm going to very quickly go through every stone I have and show you the different techniques I did, starting here with Mr. Bend Over, and it's just, again, all the painting I just went over with you, and stone spray paint is the base. The cracks, again, a Swiss Army knife. You just go on whatever direction you want to go. I forget the name of this font, but again, I found it online, projected it onto the stone, and came up with that. Evil, we already talked about to some extent. Again, the acetone up here, extreme, eaten into there. And the rest is a dry brush technique, separate font. Again, very effective that you round off all the corners. Like I took it to the point here where it was like the entire top of this point is kind of eroded away. So you can go as extreme or as little as you want, but again, please do something. Don't let it be these super sharp edges everywhere. It looks so artificial. Miss Evil. Mr. Paul Bearer. Sponging technique. The design, again, I got off of just online, projected it on there, traced it, engraved it. Took a big chunk out of it on the side. Can't remember how, probably either used a jigsaw or just a steak knife or whatever, and then took See all this chewed up edge here, and I just took my trusty pocket knife and like kind of hacked and slashed at it like that to roughen it up. These things up top are made out of wood. They're just wooden finials from Lowe's that I glued on there. And that's that guy. Can it be good? We pretty much covered, got the design online, font online, the usual projecting and tracing. Painting is dry brushing. I think there's a little bit of tea staining going on up here, but like I say, I might come back and really hit all my stones with more tea staining this year. We'll see. But that's candy. We pretty much already covered this one. It's a dry brushing technique. The bricks are made out of 1/2-inch styrofoam, and that's about it. Feel free to copy this if you want. A lot of people laugh at this. It seems to get a lot of laughs. Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know if you can tell. Again, nothing is painted on. Everything is engraved, even the eyes. The eyes, again, I got online, projected, traced, cut. Some aging with spray paint going on here. Again, rounded, uneven, aged. And combination of some little bit of dry brushing, a little bit of spray paint, a little bit of everything really. There's a couple of things you probably can't even tell here, but there's some sponging that went on in here too, but not bad. Bend over his lovely wife. I leaned over. We pretty much covered this too. The acetone on the right side, a lot of tea staining going on, and just basic stone spray paint other than that. My remains, stone spray paint, tea staining with the brush. I don't think I hit this with the spray paint and the hose much. This is mostly just done with the diluted black paint and a brush. This thing, 1/2-inch styrofoam cutout. I think I got the design online, you know, just skull and crossbones design, projected and traced, cut it out, and just you know, went to town, kind of knocked some of it out here to look like when the crack went through it, you know, knocked some down, but nice little raised relief effect going on in there, so there you be. Strictly stone spray paint, a lot of tea staining with the spray paint, a lot of good weathering and cracking going on. The pedestal base made out of 2x4s and 2x6s. Again, very rounded, aged, weathered. I can't stress how important a step that is, really. It just gives so much more authenticity to it. You want a what? Oh, I'm sorry. Strictly sponging here. This section here I cut out with a hot wire. I'm going to go into that in more detail in just a little bit here when I do the last one, Film McCracken. This thing is made out of wood. It's flat on the back. I just glued it on there. I got it at Lowe's. I don't even know what you call it. It's just a little decoration that you put up. I don't even know where. It's just a little wooden decoration. I glued on there, painted it to match everything else, and comes out looking like a nice little design that was carved into the rock. That is Miss Ophelia. Okay, I saved Phil for last here because there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. Basic sponging for the initial painting. There's some spray paint aging going on. Again, the wood base, 2x4s and 2x6s. Up here, again, this is engraved, not painted on. And I basically just, again, projected and traced that on there, and then just went over it with the Dremel tool. It's time consuming, but it, you know, gives a really cool effect. This thing, the Celtic knot thing here, This is again raised relief. This is made out of 1/2-inch styrofoam. And I did this and carved these holes up here with a hot knife. I'm sorry, a hot wire. It's called a Hot Wire Foam Factory, I believe is what the name of the company. And it's a handle like a soldering iron with a wire sticking out. And the wire gets superheated and it will just melt right through styrofoam. Now, two things about that. Number one, burning styrofoam is extremely toxic, okay? Do it outdoors or in a well-ventilated area. Also, when you're engraving. Engraving this stuff just kicks out loads of styrofoam dust, which is also absolutely no good for you, so wear a mask, stay well ventilated in all cases. And with the hot wire tools, you have to be very careful because they can be extremely fragile. You have to take your time and let the heat of the wire do the work. You stick it in here and let it go all the way through, and then just very slowly carve out your circle. Now you can't press it. You're just gonna either bend the wire or break it. You just have to move it, you know, 1/4 of an inch, let it heat up and melt some more, move it again, let it melt, move it again, let it melt. And you do that, and like I say, the heat of the wire itself will do the work. And if you try to press it faster or further than that, you're just gonna wind up breaking it. So take your time. And this, again, the Celtic knot is a design I found online, projected, traced, and then just bit by bit. It took a while. All this with a hot wire. So that's it. Them's are my tombstones. I hoped I helped you out a little bit and gave you some food for thought. And give it a try. It's a lot of fun. It takes it's a hobby that takes some time, and so it's not something you're gonna whip out real fast. But it's very satisfying when you can knock one of these out, and it looks really good. And you get compliments on it Halloween night and everything. So whatever, give it a try. It's really cool. See you soon.